problem solving ability, to be creative, to think along the right direction is what this education is going to provide you. Nothing more than that. It is only the training. How do you look at? How are you creative? That is all it matters. So, information is not something which is value. Processing the information is what is value. And storing this information is always a certain ability, a certain self confidence that this person gains by knowing that I belong to a certain nation which has produced really bright minds. That itself contributes to the self confidence, which is an intangible benefit that we have. Thank you for providing me an opportunity to present my thoughts on Nyaya Darshana under 6 topics broadly. First is, how is this text organized? Nowadays, this text is not studied in many places at all. We all know, in fact, today morning, one of the students was asking this question when Professor Mahadevan was making a presentation. So, he had listed a few things. One of the students was asking, why have you not listed Brahma Sutra? So, in the ancient period. The ancient period, most of the disciplines have been enunciated in the form of sutras, as most of us know. For instance, in Yoga Shastra, you have Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. For Vyakarana Shastra, you have Panini's Sutras. For Vedanta, we have Brahma Sutras. For Mimamsa, we have Jaimini Sutras. And when it comes to studying Chandas Shastra, the prosody, we have something called Chandas Sutra. So, Chandas Shastra is in the form of sutras. So, irrespective of the discipline, we have even all these rituals that we keep performing, they are all codified in the form of sutras. There is Shrauta Sutra, there is Grihya Sutra, so there are Shulva Sutras, there are Dharma Sutras, how to conduct oneself. All this knowledge system has been presented in the form of sutras in those days. When I see those days, when I say, it essentially means something like 2500 years prior to that, okay, current era. This Nyaya Sutra, which has been composed and presented to us by Gautama, has around 530 sutras. And how it is organized is something which has been nicely stated in one of the commentaries that we have for this. Let me just add one more thing right away before I move further. The very definition of sutra, Alpaksharam asandigdham saravad vishwato mukham astobham anavadyancha sutram sutravido viduhu. This is what they say. Alpaksharam is one of characteristics of sutra. So, there will be something which has to be taken from the earlier sutra, they will be extremely tersely presented to us. So, the succinctness is something which is a hallmark of the sutras. So, when you want to make it very precise, so you may have to sometime borrow certain things. See, in those days, people have been studying by committing to memory most of the things, and since they are in memory, you may be able to very easily take one pada from elsewhere and then add to the sutra, and this has been the tradition. And they will be very, very short, and therefore, understanding this sutra always requires a certain commentary in order to see this has been taught by a teacher to the student, and therefore the knowledge transmission is not an issue. But if you are naive to this, so then you may not be able to. In fact, even these texts, other texts which were authored little later in those days, are so terse. There is something called Aryabhatiya. This Aryabhatiya has only 108 verses. But the commentary will run to some 400 pages. Without that, you may not be able to understand. So too, Brahma Sutras, because somebody was asking, without Shankaracharya's commentary, I think nobody can touch this Brahma Sutra. We will not know anything. So this it is not some annotation which is just added or some interpretation which is done as we like. It is something which is transmitted from the founder himself what he meant. Okay, it is in the Shishya Parampara. Somebody ventures to author the sutras. Now, as far as this Nyaya Sutra is concerned, so Yoga Sutra has something called Vyasa Bhashya. So this is one of the short commentaries on which there is a much more elaborate commentary which has been written by Vachaspati Mishra. It is called Yoga Vaisharadi. Vachaspati Mishra was an amazing scholar, absolutely amazing, so who has written commentaries on various texts, including Bhagavad Pada's commentary on Brahma Sutra. Okay. So this Vachaspati Mishra has written, since some of you have studied this Yoga Sutra, it is something which is worth looking into. Let us get into this Nyaya Sutra. We find commentaries on this at 5 levels. In fact, it is called Panchagranthi. So there is some similarity between this Brahma Sutra and this Nyaya Sutra, in the sense that that also has 4 levels of super commentaries. Here also have 4 levels of super commentaries. But the number of sutras as such, okay, you can take to the slide. The number of sutras is 530, and this has been divided into 5 adhyayas. Each adhyaya consists of 2 anhikas. So if you go from the other side, you can see. So Nyaya Darshana consists of, to the right end, you see. So it has 5 adhyayas, and each adhyaya consists of 2 anhikas. Therefore, there will be 10 anhikas. And this anhika is further 84 prakaranas are there, and this prakarana is essentially a particular kind of a topic. Okay, there are 84 topics which are classified in the text. Okay, so 84 prakaranas, and these 84 prakaranas is this totally 530 sutras. And how should we understand this? In fact, if you just take a sutra, after all, what is sutra? Sutra is, so suppose we take first sutra, Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodhaha. How many words are there? Yogaha is one word. Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha is another word. Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha is a compound word which consists of 3 other words, Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha. Okay. Now, why did I ask this question? After all, sutras are basically a list of words. But the list of words which are meaningfully arranged so that it conveys some sense to you. Arbitrarily, you cannot put words, that will not. Okay. Now, this sutras is basically Varna Samuhaha Padam, Pada Samuhaha Sutram, Sutra Samuhaha Prakaranam. Okay. A group of sutras dealing with a particular topic forms a prakarana, and prakarana samuhaha anhikam, anhika samuhaha adhyayaha, panchadhyayi cha idam shastram. Okay, so this is how we have to understand the structure of this Nyaya Darshana. Of course, the author is Gautama, as I told you, and the name Gautama is something which appears among various names of the sages that are listed in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Okay, Gautama, Gautamo, Shandilya, Chandilyo, it just goes on. There we find the earliest reference. How old is this Nyaya Shastra? Do we conceive this Gautama to be the person who just introduced Nyaya Shastra to us? No. So all these authors have to be understood as authors who at some point of time contemplated upon this issue very seriously and decided that they will present this topic to us in a way that is quite comprehensible and in a way that it is quite structured. This is all they do. This we have to be very clear. Okay. So, the antiquity of Nyaya Shastra can be understood by us from a certain quotation that is found in the Upanishad. So, I have a passage here from the Chandogya Upanishad, 7th Adhyaya. So, there is a dialogue that goes on between two people. The participants are Sanat Kumara and Narada. So, Narada approaches Sanat Kumara, and then when they meet each other, Narada asks. So, if you just look at the beginning of this passage, Adhihi Bhagava iti. Adhihi means may you kindly teach. Bhagavaha is a respectable word. O revered one, may you kindly teach me. Itiha upasasada. Upasasada means sort of approached. Who approached? Naradaha Sanatkumaram. Tam hovacha yadvetha tenamopasida. He says, so you first tell me what you have learnt, and then I will be able to take it forward. What is it that you have learned? What is it that you seek from me? These two things the teacher has to ask. He asks. See, in fact, that statement is there. Tataste urdhvam vakshyami iti saho vacha. Urdhvam vakshyami, I will take you further. Then he is listing several topics that he has learnt. Rigvedam Bhagavodhyami Yajurvedam Samavedam Atharvanam Chaturtham Itihasa Puranam Panchamam Vedanam Vedam Pitryam Rashim Daivam Nithim Vakovakyam Ekayanam Deva Vidyam Brahma Vidyam Bhuta Vidyam Kshatra Vidyam Nakshatra Vidyam Sarpadeva Jana Vidyam Yetat Bhagavodhyami. Narada lists some 20 disciplines that I have mastered. So, there one of the terms refers to this Nyaya Shastra. So, it is for this I wanted to tell you. So, here there are two words at least that you should take note of. One is Vako Vakyam, is the terminology that has been employed by the ancients to refer to this particular discipline of, you may call argumentation, okay, it is not a right term, but so this is a discipline which allows you to present arguments logically. This is a discipline that enables you to refute the other's argument logically. Okay. So this is something which we need to understand thoroughly. So nowadays all kinds of arguments are being presented by various people which does not stand the logic or reasoning. So this is something which enables you to think through logically and present your arguments, so that it is convincing. There are various other things which have to be first of all agreed upon when people want to discuss or debate, if you have to arrive at some conclusion. Anyway, that we will come to little later. So, the Vako Vakyam is the name. The other thing you just see is Ekayanam. This is important to us. Ekayanam. So, what do these words mean is something which has been handed down to us by Bhagavad Pada, Shankaracharya, who has written commentary on the Upanishads. So, here he says Rashim. Basically, Rashi means group, Dhana Rashi, Dhanya Rashi, and so on. But Rashim basically refers to Ganita Shastram. Then Vako Vakyam is Tarka Shastram. Ekayanam is Niti Shastra. You understand? Niti Shastra has been given the name Ekayanam. What do you understand by Ekayanam? Ayana? What does Ayana mean? Ayana means Marga. Okay. So now Uttarayana means motion towards. Okay. Motion towards north is Uttarayana. The sun's motion towards north is Uttarayana. So Dakshinayana is the passage towards the southern solstice. Okay, Ayana. Here, Ekayana is the term that has been used. So if the society has to have a certain progressive society, if this has to be a progressive society, okay, moving forward, the only way is adopting niti. Therefore, ekayanam means is the only direction that you can choose. So if you have to be a progressive society, if you have to live as a harmonious society, otherwise there will be utter chaos. So therefore, the term that they have employed is all quite meaningful. Ekayanam means Niti Shastra. Anyway, with this we will move further. What does the term Nyaya mean? Nyaya. This word has at least three connotations. Okay. So one is Uchita is the sense in which the word Nyaya is used. Okay. It is something which can be derived by this. I will not get into the detailed derivation of this. This has to do with the grammar. Niyamena iyate iti. Okay. The second sense is niti. Okay. So assuming that niti is something which is adopted by the courts, we give the name Nyayalaya. It is in that sense you can call it as a Nyayalaya. So morals and ethics are upheld, and they also form a certain logical reasoning and so on. So therefore, it is called Nyayalaya. We even call judges as Nyayadhisha, right? So that is how the terminology goes. Then the third sense is a more technical sense in which this has been employed to refer to the Nyaya Shastra as such. So this is Yukti is the sense. After all, if you want to communicate something to the other person effectively, then it has to be appealing to the logic of the other person also. So there has to be a certain common ground that is being built, and then you try to make certain arguments with him, and then you try to convince him. So argument generally means certain inferences. Without inference, I don't think there is anything that is possible. Even if the court wants to decide on something, so it has certain facts with it, then based on the facts you make certain inferences, and the inferences, if they are quite solid, then it is appealing to us. Otherwise we say it is all some fallacious reasoning and so on. So all these form a part of this Nyaya Shastra. Technically, people have defined this Nyaya to be, you find that in small fonts, Pratignya hetu udaharana upanaya nigamanatmaka panchavayava vakyam. Okay. So this is what Panchavayava vakyam. I will explain that little later. So this is what the technical definition of Nyaya is. When you want the other person to gain the same knowledge as you possess, you have to employ sentences in a particular sequence. And that sequence is, first you make a certain pratignya, then you build upon that hetu, why am I making this statement? Then you give a certain instance through which he will be able to understand that, and then you can make him conclude certain things. Okay, that is what is technically stated here. I will not get into the deeper definitions. Okay, so I will just read Anumiti Charamakarana Linga Paramarisha Prayojaka Shabda Jnana Janaka Vakyatvam. Now, I was just mentioning a little while ago that there are multiple levels of commentary that has been authored on this Nyaya Darshana. Nyaya Darshana is by Gautama. We do not know when exactly he was, but there are certain estimates that have been made, so that vary widely. So some 6th century to 2nd century BE, some 800 years have been given by various people. We don't know. Let us not bother about that. So Nyaya Sutra. Then Nyaya Bhashya. This is something which is amazing. So this has been authored by Vatsyayana. Okay. So Vatsyayana, so you may be familiar, his name is also associated with Kama Sutra and so on. He has written various commentaries on this. Vatsyayana's commentary is a very profound commentary. I thoroughly enjoyed. Recently, I had an occasion to look into that. Then we have another text which is by Udyotakara. You may not be familiar with his name. So he has written something called Vartika. In the Vyakarana tradition, we have Panini, Katyayana, Patanjali. What have they done? Panini is Sutrakara, Vartikakara, and Patanjali is Bhashyakara. In that sense, here Gautama is the Sutrakara, then we have Bhashya by Vatsyayana, then we have Vartika by Udyotakara. Vartika will be some short sentences, really beautifully done. Unfortunately, so it is not studied, that much I know. Even those people who pursue their studies in Nyaya Shastra, they start with Tarka Sangraha, they go to Muktavali, they go to various other things. Mostly they dwell on Navya Nyaya. Ancient Nyaya is not a part of many schools. I heard that it is in Kerala. 2-3 years back I visited Kerala, and then some Sanskrit professor came. So he just told me that I am teaching Nyaya Shastra. Then I asked him, what do you teach? I mean, this is the syllabus, he said. Then I asked him some basic things on this Nyaya Sutra. Absolutely nothing. I don't know what is being transpired in the class. So this, I'm pretty sure that this was not taught by him in any sense. I did not ask anything profound, but simple things. So this Nyaya Vartika is really amazing text. I'll just give you a flavor of how things are by just a couple of quotations. This is by Udyotakara. Then we have a much more elaborate commentary by Vachaspati Mishra, whom I just referred to. He is an amazing person. So he has written on yoga, he has written on Nyaya, he has written on Vedanta. In fact, he is considered as a Shastra Parangata. So his style of writing is also really amazing. And the last one is by Udayanacharya. Udayanacharya has written independent works besides these commentaries. Okay? So one is called Nyaya Kusumanjali. This Nyaya Kusumanjali is a text which is primarily meant to prove the existence of Ishvara. To prove the existence of Ishvara, it is a big work, so on about 300-400 pages with a nice commentary. This is by Udayanacharya. So he was in 10th century. So all these things that I have listed are written at least 10 centuries before, some of them 20 centuries before. Udyotakara actually commences his commentary with this nice verse. Yadakshapadah pravaro muninam shamaya shastram jagato jagada kutarkika jnana nivritti hetuhu karishyate tasya maya nibandhaha. Another name for Gautama is Akshapada. So you have heard the author of Vaisheshika, Kanada. So here he is generally referred by the word Akshapada. Pravaro Muninam is an epithet that has been used to describe that he was. Pravara means Shrestha, foremost. Shamaya Shastram Jagato Jagada. Shamaya means Shama, Dama, Uparama, Titiksha, etc. These are all certain qualities which a person is supposed to imbibe in order to be harmony with himself and bring harmony around him. Okay, the Shama, Dama, these are all things which refer to a certain control of the internal organ. Okay, internal organ is Buddhi. So it is Buddhi which actually gives you the impulse to do something, right? Whatever be the indriya that comes into action is all driving its impulse from the Buddhi. So this Antahkarana is supposed to have Shamadama and so on. Okay? So that will make the Indriya Nigraha happen. So Shamaya Shastram, he says. So the Shama is, that's what I meant by certain harmony. Even if there is a certain huge dispute that is happening, so these parties have to cool down, right? When will they cool down? Provided there is a certain argument which is presented which is convincing to them, they will sort of cool down. Okay. And even for us to convince ourselves, suppose somebody says don't engage in that. So the immediate question is, why should I not? Then you have to present a certain argument which is convincing to him, make him understand that that is a futile exercise which you should not do. Once that fellow understands, then nobody can make him also engage, right? So it is for this Shastra is something which is very useful. Shamaya Shastram Jagato Jagada Kutarkika Jnana Nivritti Hetuhu. So Kutarkika, Tarkika is a term that is used to refer to logicians. Okay. So Sutarkika means a good logician, Kutarkika means a bad logician. Okay. Like various people in our government, Kutarkika. Okay, Kutsito Raja Kuraja. This is what we say. Kutsitaha Tarkikaha, Kutarkikaha. Okay. So like some of our politicians, right? So there the kind of argument that they present is something which is very easily seen to be missing the logic. Okay, he says Kutarka Ajnana Nivritti Hetuhu means, so the ignorance that is being spread by these fellows, Ajnana is fallacious things, knowledge. Okay, Ajnana can mean various things. It can mean ignorance. It can mean several other things. So na jnanam ajnanam. This na has 6 different meanings. I will leave it at that now. So this ajnana nivritti hetuhu means this is enabling you to overcome. Hetuhu means the reason. So that which will serve, which will enable you to overcome this. So wrong knowledge, delusion, etc. that has been created by these people. So this nibandha kriyate. Okay. Now, in his text, having stated this, Udyotakara further classifies the seekers of knowledge into 4 groups. You can see Pratipannaha, Apratipannaha, Sandigdhaha, Viparyastaha. These are the 4 categories. Okay. So Pratipannaha, suppose many of my students who attend my class, generally I look at the faces and then try to understand that this fellow has not understood, and therefore we try to repeat sometimes, ask some questions and so on. So we try to make them Pratipanna. Pratipanna means as much as possible that he understands. Sometimes the background may be insufficient, therefore he will become Apratipanna in spite of attending. Some fellows may have some notions and this may be contradicting, and therefore it could be doubtful. And if you come with a certain ideology, then you will be viparyasta, understanding the same thing wrongly, right? So one thing which I saw was, I'm just reminded of this. Viparyasta, there was some paper news somewhere, somebody died, etc. Then somebody is asking, I think Modi is referring to that, and he says, even if an animal dies, dog dies, we feel very sad. Why not we feel bad about it? We will definitely consider this as a huge loss, etc. He mays. Then the other fellow says, he is actually comparing him to dog. So he is calling him a dog. So this is viparyasta. So twisting knowingly. So this is something which sometimes may happen. So this viparyasta jnana can be from the viewpoint you look. Sometimes it can be out of misunderstanding, total misunderstanding. Anyway, Now, these are the four categories generally we find in our classes. Okay. This everywhere it happens. Then the one who is Pratipanna means he only is eligible to be a teacher. He should have a mastery over the subject, should have contemplated, thoroughly digested for himself, then he will be able to communicate effectively. So Pratipanna is a teacher. Now the other one, other three categories fall under what is known as Pratipadya. The word Pratipadya can mean two things. It is Karmani, Yat Pratyaya. So it can either refer to the subject that is being taught or the individual who is to be taught. It can be both ways. In fact, since some of you are familiar with Sanskrit, there are four terms which are connected. So Pratipadya, so you can call it as Pratipadayitri Pratipadaka, okay, the one who tries to explain. Then Pratipadanam is basically the process of explaining, and then Pratipattihi is Jnanam. They are all connected. You understand? Pratipadakaha, Pratipadyaha, Pratipattihi, Pratipadanam. So Pratipatti is the ultimate purpose, that is. So this Pratipadya is gaining knowledge, okay, and this happens in four modes. So the mode that is being chosen here is so Shabda primarily. So I am trying to communicate to you, okay, some body of knowledge. So the Shabda is being received by you and it is being processed in your own mind, and that generates a certain knowledge in you. So therefore the jnana that happens through lectures is Shabda jnana. And sometimes the Shabda will obviously be employed in order to make you infer certain things also. But they are all completely different processes, you have to understand. Perception is a different process through which we gain some knowledge. You just look at something, so this sky is so beautiful, you just look at and then marvel. So this is Pratyaksha Jnana. So the moon arises and so on. So this is, so this, you look at a certain photograph of a country, New Zealand, whatever it country. So you just get an image of that. So this is Pratyaksha Jnana. Just see an image, no Shabda employed, okay. So you gain some Jnana. You look at some fellow, okay. So the kind of dress that he puts, the kind of looks that he has, so you can easily understand that he is a crackpot. So on the other hand, you see certain other things. This is generally certain impressions come. So this is Pratyaksha Jnana, no words employed. Sometimes certain inference process takes place. Okay, you look at somebody, he is having a very sad look. So you immediately understand that this fellow has some problem. Okay, so there is some affliction which he is undergoing. So the face reveals. This is all Pratyaksha. And the face reveals, there is a certain inferential process also goes on. But what inference, where, etc., we have to just understand certain things. Okay. Now the doctor goes, so he either senses your pulses or he uses a thermometer, and then he understands that you have some fever. So this is, so the virus testing is all because of inference. How do you know that this fellow has COVID or not? Certain inferential process. It is not that nothing is going to be tested. Of course, the graphs are going to be looked into or some numbers are going to be seen. But it is inference. So here what is happening is Shabda Jnana and analogy. See, analogy. So suppose you want to describe some fellow as someone who does not have good intentions, who is quite cruel, etc. Then you can say he is like Chota Rajan. Okay. Have you heard of Chota Rajan? Or a more popular example can be our Rahul Gandhi. Okay, his thinking is our like Rahul Gandhi, which means, so you get some impression, right? This is analogy. You just give one word, then you understand certain things, right? So we don't need to explain further. So this analogy is also helpful in gaining some knowledge, in transferring knowledge. This is what is. These are the four major things that are employed. There are a few other things also. The four things that you find below basically means of knowledge. We call them as pramana. Understand? We are all called pramanas. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda. Okay, these are the four things. There are of course various other things which we will not get into. Nyaya has taken this. Now, this ultimately this Shastra is for Shreyas Sadhanam. Any Shastra for that matter. Okay, all Shastras are meant for Shreyas. So there is a Upanishadic mantra, Kathopanishad. Shreyascha preyascha manushyametah tau samparitthi vivinakti dhiraha shreyo hi dhiro abhipreyaso vrinite preyo mando yogakshemad vrinite. One is Shreyaha refers to the spiritual prosperity. Preyaha refers to material prosperity. Things present themselves to the human being. Depending upon the maturity that this person has, he chooses one of them. Okay? Shreyaha, Preyaha. See, some people have a natural proclivity to move towards Preyaha. Some people have a natural proclivity towards Shreyaha. See, there are many people to whom you might have at least heard. So they may be earning quite a bit. At the age of 35, 40, they feel that this is all a futile exercise. I have enough. I will hereafter take the pursuit of knowledge. Okay, Shamadama, they will just leave things and then do certain things which will be useful for the society. Many of even these monks, who have so Ramakrishna Math order, etc., some of them are really bright people, but they commit themselves to certain cause, and that is Preyaha. So they can use their own abilities that they have gained in either mathematics or computer science, or they may be PhDs of some of these brightest universities. But then they consider this pursuit is only going to take me to Preyaha, material prosperity, which I am not seeking for. I want to evolve myself into a better human being. And that choice is what is called Shreyaha. And that choice is made that you live simple, and then you try to contribute to the society rather than keep gaining more and more from the society. So this pursuit is broadly divided into Shreyaha and Preyaha. Now the Shastra, see, there is no need for anybody to be taught that you have to run after the world, and participate in the rat race for you to materially prosper. No need to teach, right? What is there to teach? Everybody knows. So there is a natural tendency to move towards that. Shastra is something which tries to caution you that in doing so you may be trapped. So don't we know these politicians are after money and they try to do all kinds of things. Not even politicians, even the businessmen, right? So that what should not be done is also done. Why? There is a certain greed to have more and more and more. This is a natural tendency. Shastra is something which tries to help you understand that this pursuit is not something which is going to be useful. You cannot do this. So Shastra is meant for Shreyaha. Okay? Shreyaha is sort of universal well-being. So this Shreyaha can be of two types. One is Drishta and Adrishta. Okay? And Drishta is something which is seen, experienced by us. Adrishta is something which is not tangible to us. Our Guru so asks us to practice certain things. Certain things may not be immediately tangible to us. So you practice this yoga daily, nothing will happen. So immediately, sometimes you may feel relieved, sometimes you may not feel. Certain things you may feel, certain things you may not feel, but in the long run they may be useful. That is what is called adrishta prayojana. Understand? So drishta is something which is tangible. So you suppose you like rasagulla, you eat rasagulla, immediately you feel happy. Okay. If some fellow gives you a second serving, you will feel more happy. Third serving, all the more happy. So this may happen. This is all drishta prayojana. Immediately, okay, you feel a certain sense of satisfaction. Adrishta prayojana is something which you may not immediately realize what is happening here, okay? But this will be useful in the long run. So that is drishta and adrishta, this is all it means. Then sukha, drishtam sukham, okay, and adrishtam is basically ahita nivritti in the long run, okay. So live a certain disciplined life. Okay, there are many people whom I have seen. So anything that you offer, they may not accept in between. They have certain schedules. So this is when I will eat. This is the limit by which I will eat. There was a man, I remember, even if he comes to our house, he will just take 2 idlis maximum. So however much you compel him, no, I cannot take. This is my restriction. So these are certain things which we impose. And this discipline actually helps. It is a adrishta prayojana. You don't immediately see something in that, but that discipline sort of helps. Okay, ahita nivritti. Then this ahita nivritti can happen in 2 ways. One is atyantika nivritti. Ahita is something which is not good in the long run. Okay. Atyantiki nivrittihi, anatyantiki nivritti. Suppose you have a certain headache and you apply Amritanjan or you take some tablet. Okay. This is gone. But that doesn't mean a headache is gone forever, right? So similarly, if there is a thorn which has gone into our leg, so that is piercing, so you just immediately remove. You change your chappal which is biting you. So these are all tatkalika nivritti. Atyantika nivritti is something once and for all we will not be led into a certain state of despondency. This is called atyantika dukkha nivritti. Okay. Can it ever happen? Yes, it can. So even as we live, so that is something which is aimed at. So the purpose of Nyaya Shastra, okay, so the purpose of Nyaya Shastra is to have this atyantika dukkha nivritti. This is what has been stated also clearly in the text. Okay. So we will keep that for the moment. The importance of studying has been highlighted nicely. In the morning there were some discussions about this Artha Shastra. Okay. So even Professor Mahadevan was mentioning that not many actually try to read the original and understand. So what is being conveyed and so on and so forth. They just look at some translation and then they extrapolate, everybody extrapolates and nobody clearly understands. That is what he was mentioning. So that is actually a huge compendium. So written long back, almost 2000 years back. The amazing text, I have looked into certain sections of it. Right at the beginning, he has this interesting verse. Pradipas sarva vidyanam upayas sarva karmanam ashrayas sarva dharmanam shashvadan vikshiki mata. What is this? Pradipaha sarva vidyanam. Anvikshiki is the name that has been given to Nyaya Shastra. So earlier I gave you a name, it is called Vako Vakyam. Okay. So here you have another term which is called Anvikshiki. Anvikshiki Mata. Shashvat means forever, Nityam. All. That is how we have the word. Many people have the word Shashvat. Okay. So Shashvat, term you have heard, no? So Shashvat, from that you derive the word Shashvata. Okay. So is it going to be something which is permanently available with you all the time? Is it Shashvatama? Is it Shashvata? Okay. Now this verse highlights 3 purposes served by this discipline of learning. One is, he says, Pradeepa Sarvavidyanam. Pradeepaha means lamp. Sarvavidyanam Pradeepaha means irrespective of the discipline of learning that you choose, this is going to shed light on that. Obviously, right? When you have a certain logical way of approaching things, whether you learn physics, whether you learn chemistry, whether you learn Nyaya, whether you learn Vyakarana or music, okay? So this is going to shed you some light. Anyway, so there are many ragas obviously, but 72 are certain. How is this number 72 comes? If you understand that, then you will have a much better appreciation for all that. Okay, there are Melakarta ragas. Anyway, so this Pradeepaha Sarvavidyanam means, so this is something which will throw you light. So to make you ask the right question and seek the answer in a logical manner. So it is in that sense, it is going to be useful for all disciplines. It will throw light. Pradeepa Sarvavidyanam. Then Upayas Sarvakarmanam. See, many times people undergo a certain dilemma whether I have to do this or I have to do that. So what will help you is, so this right thing, right line of thinking. Okay. Therefore, Sarvakarmanam Upayaha. So then the third thing is Ashrayas Sarvadharmanam. This is something which is again a very important purpose. Sarvadharmanam Ashrayah. Otherwise, it will be complete anarchy. You understand? So you cannot control people forcefully all the time. See, it has to be appealing to people. So once it is appealing, they themselves will get control. So Sarva Dharmana means for the establishment of Dharma. Okay? Ashrayaha means it is the locus. Shashvat, forever. That is how this discipline Anvikshiki is described. So this is the statement of Kautilya in his Arthashastra. In fact, he classifies knowledge into 4 types. Varta, Anvikshiki and so on. Okay. So he just classifies. There he explains this, what is Anvikshiki. Okay. Then, in order to have some little bit of fun, I'll introduce this verse to you. This is attributed to Udayanacharya. So I was mentioning Udayana, right? Who was in 10th century. So the Udayanacharya, see, many a times it just happens that scholars who are absolutely in pursuit of something, they will forget every other thing, they will totally engage. You may find great poets in poverty. You may find great saints in poverty. So this is something which happens. So Udayanacharya apparently, so the story goes like this. So at some point of time, he had very, very minimal resources and he could not even run the family and so on. He was not cared for much. See, there are scholars who may not even go to the court. Suppose the king would like to honor. I am talking about 10-15 centuries ago. So even for you to establish yourself as a scholar, you have to go there, right? So it is not just that you take a flight and then you go to Varanasi from Chennai. So that doesn't happen. So you have to walk for several weeks, you will have to walk for months and so on, then only you go there. But then there may be people who may not want even to do that. So then, I mean, unless they are cared for, okay, by the society, this cannot flourish. So once he was in that situation, and he apparently went to Ishvara, okay, and then said, this verse is addressed to the Lord. Aishwarya madamattosi mamavajñāya vartase upasthiteshu bauddheshu madadhīnāt avasthitihi. He said to Ishvara, you seem to be somewhat in a different world, thinking that many wealthy people are coming to you. Okay? Aishwarya madamattosi. Okay? Many people are coming and offering. So why should I care for this poor fellow? You keep thinking like that. Mam avajñāya vartase. You are not understanding the importance of me. Upasthiteshu bauddheshu madadhīnāt avasthitihi. See, upasthiteshu bodheshu means this Ishvara, the existence of Ishvara is not accepted by Buddhas, Buddha. Understand? They have their own guru, but there is nothing like so Ishvara for them. Now he is saying, see, if Buddhas and come tell that there is no Ishvara, then who will come? I have to establish the existence of Ishvara, therefore you do not understand the merit of me. Understand? So this is what he is trying to say to Ishvara. So you better take care of me. Otherwise your existence is itself in problem. Okay? And nobody will come to you thinking that many wealthy people are coming, you are ignoring me. Then only you will understand my importance. See, that is how he says. Aishwarya madamattosi mam avajnaya vartase upasthiteshu bodheshu madadhina avasthitihi. Okay? I have to prove the existence of Ishvara using my logic. Okay. This is the first sutra. So I want you people to just repeat at least one or two sutras you should learn. Pramana prameya samshaya prayojana drishtanta siddhanta avayava tarka nirnaya vada jalpa vitanda hetva bhasa chala jati nigrahasthananam tattva nishreyasadhigamaha. प्रमाण प्रमेय संशय प्रयोजन दृष्टांत सिद्धांतावयव तर्क निर्णय वादजल्प वितंडा हेत्वाभास छल जाति निग्रह स्थानानां तत्वज्ञानान् निश्रेयसाधिगमः. This is the first sutra. In fact, the entire Nyaya Shastra is only an expansion of this sutra. So there are 16 entities which are listed here. Pramana prameya संशय प्रयोजन दृष्टांत सिद्धांत अवयव तर्क निर्णय वाद जल्प वितंडा हेत्वाभास छल जाति निग्रह स्थानानाम तत्वज्ञानात् निश्रेयसाधिगमः. He says तत्वज्ञानात् means so clearly understanding them. Tatvajnanat. Okay. So a clear understanding of these 16 entities will enable you Nishreyasadhigamaha, attainment of the highest good. Okay, highest good is what is called Nishreyasam. Okay, so Nirgataha Shreyaha Yasmat Saha. That is how you have to understand the word Nishreyasa. So there is nothing which is beyond this Shreyaha. Okay, so this will help you. This is what is the first sutra. It is listing 16 things. Now, what do these terms mean? Each one of them. What is pramana? What is prameya? What is samshaya, prayojana, drishtanta? So they will all be elaborated further. That is what this entire Nyaya Darshana is all about. Okay. So pramana means the means of knowledge. We just listed 4 of them. Okay, pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, shabda. There are other schools who have considered other pramanas also, the arthapatti, anupalabdhi and so on. But pramana essentially means the means of knowledge by which you gain knowledge. This is what is epistemology. Epistemology is basically studying. So how do we gain knowledge? So this is something which has been analyzed and thoroughly investigated in this discipline. Prameya refers to something which is known through pramana. Okay? So whenever there is a cognition, so there is a means by which you cognize, there is an entity which you cognize, there is one who cognizes, okay? And there is a knowledge which arises out of this. Okay? So this is what is the process that is involved. Okay, then samshaya prayojana. So all these are nicely elaborated. So we may touch upon one or two of them in greater detail, okay, as we proceed further. And all that it says is, the hetva bhasa is fallacious reason. Okay, so this is something which is very important. When you actually get into a dialogue, discussion with the other person, he will try to give you some reason as to why he is a bad fellow. You may be giving some reason as to why he is a good fellow. So the debate goes on, and you may have to point out the fallacies in his reasoning, and you may be able to substantiate, okay, so the validity as to why your argument is correct, and so on. So for all this we need reasoning. So of this, one term which I want to clarify to you was, you see the word tarka appearing in the second line. There is a text which normally people study as Tarka Sangraha. Tarka. So Tarka, what is Tarka is something which is nicely explained in the commentary by Vatsyayana. I was just mentioning to you. Okay, the sutras have the first layer of commentary by Vatsyayana. So this Tarka is primarily for two reasons. One is to firmly establish one's own position, to thoroughly and convincingly refute the other's position. Okay, a kind of statements that transpire. Okay, that is what is tarka. Tarkaha na pramana sangrihitaha na pramanantaram pramananam anugrahakaha tattvajnanaya kalpate. Okay, so this is what is stated. Na pramana sangrihitaha means this tarka does not fall under means of knowledge. It cannot be considered as an independent means of knowledge as well, but this is something which will be anugrahaka, means it will bless you. Bless you means it will help you rather by posing these questions, these kind of suppositions, okay, or questions. So you will be able to think along a particular line which will make you convince what has been earlier understood by some other means of knowledge. This is what is called pramananam anugrahakaha. Okay, anugrahakaha tattvajnanaya kalpate. Okay, suppose many of these things, the body has a tendency to cure itself. ये हड्डी टूट गया तो अपने आप भी जुड़ जाता है. But all that you do is just putting something, right? It's just anugrahaka, blessing, so that it doesn't go here and there. But this joining has to happen on its own. Similarly, knowledge has to arise by a certain pramana, but certain other things will help you in gaining this. Okay. So this anugrahakaha means something which sort of blesses. Tattvajnanaya kalpate. Okay. I'll give you an example here. He gives Kimidan janma kritakena hetuna nivartyate ahosvit akritakena. Atha. So Kimidan janma kritakena means kritaka is something which is being produced by us. Okay. So idan janma, he is asking this question. This janma kritakena hetuna nivartyate ahosvit akritakena. Okay. So if you say that there is going to be a cessation of the cycle of birth and rebirth, is it going to be something which is happening by something which is produced or akritakena? It is not produced. This is an interesting argument. Kritakena hetuna nivartyate akritakena. He just poses this question and then builds on. I'll just give you the summary, I will not read this. So he'll just tell you, if you say it is produced to something, anything that is being produced is nashvara. Okay. And therefore this hetu itself is nashvara, and therefore the effect also will be nashvara. If you say akritakena, so then it is not going to have an end itself. And so on and so forth, it will just go on. This kind of a argument being presented is what is called tarka. Okay. So one more simple example I'll just give you that will be much more easier for you. Suppose somebody says that I infer fire because of smoke. Okay. I infer fire because of smoke. Then if you ask this question, why would you say that there was fire just because there is smoke? I will not accept, suppose you say. So then you may have to employ tarka. Okay. So this general example that is given is, suppose you want to have some dhupa. Okay, most of us use this agarbatti, right? So what does it do? It produces some smoke. Okay, so without firing it, may the agarbatti have some smoke? So there has to be, okay, fire whenever there is a smoke. So this is what is called actually tarka. Why do you run for this? So that is how one has to go and argue. That is not actually a pramana technically. Okay, this tarka is actually classified into 5 types. Okay, so this has been, there is a great logician called Jagadisha. So he has said, one is Atmashraya, the other is Anyonyashraya, there is something called Chakraka, Anavastha, and Pramana Badhita. Okay, Pramana Badhitarthakaha. I will tell you, this Atmashraya. Atmashraya is a dosha, self dependence. Okay. So, can you think of an example? There is a nice statement which is made by, I think, Vachaspati Mishra somewhere, I remember. Nahi susikshitopi nataha swaskandham arohitum arhati. Nataha is a dancer. Okay. So, he may dance on a ball, he may be dancing on some ring, etc. There are various things who can do that. So, even people who do the gymnasium, they do various kinds of things which are completely mind boggling. But then he is saying, so whatever be the skills that he has acquired, he cannot climb on his own shoulders, right? He can climb on other shoulders and he can climb on up to 5 levels. But he cannot climb on his own shoulders, right? So this is not possible. This is what is called Atmashraya. It depends on oneself. Anyonyashraya, many of us may know. Suppose somebody asks, so which is the house of? Okay. So Richa here. He says it is the opposite house of Mahesha. So then he asks, what is Mahesha's house? The opposite house of Richa. Suppose you say. Okay. So this is going to be Anyonyashraya. You don't know either. So this is dependent on this, that is dependent on this. Okay. So Chakraka is something which you extend it to more than 2. Okay. If the dependency goes on, okay, with more than 2, 3, 4, etc., it is called Chakraka. And the dependency goes forever. Okay. So then, so suppose you say, how did this mango come? This came from this mango tree. Where did this mango tree come from? Some other mango seed. Where did that come from? So some other mango tree, some other mango seed. It will just go on. Okay. It is what is called anavastha. Okay. So pramana badhitaha tarka, pramana badhitarthakaha. So this is something which you know something, and somebody else gives you a different kind of a knowledge. Then no, this I know personally. Whatever you say, I will not agree. You will say, right? So this is what is called pramana badhitarka. And this tarka is something which is very, very useful. In fact, this has been stated in Manusmriti. Arsham dharmopadeshancha vedashastra virodhina yastarkena anusandhatte sadharmam vedane taraha. Okay, this tarka is very, very important. And many a times they say dustarkat suviramyatam. We call shushka tarka is one thing. Okay, and dustarka, these are the 2 terms that are generally employed when this argument is completely flawed. Okay. Anyway, that is the first sutra. Now this is the second sutra of the Nyaya Darshana. You may repeat this also. Dukkha janma pravritti dosha mithya jnananam uttarottarapaye tadanantarapayat apavargaha. Apavargaha means freedom, moksha. So it says dukkha janma pravritti dosha mithya jnananam uttarottarapaye tadanantarapayat apavargaha. Okay. There are 5 things which are listed here. So this, the highest good that you want to reach is possible, okay, when a cessation of a series of things happen. Dukkha, janma, pravritti, dosha, mithya. What it says is uttarottarasya apaya. Apaya means cessation. So, when the succeeding things, so is gone, then the previous thing is gone because it is dependent on that. Okay. Uttarottarasya apaye tadanantarasya apayat means the immediately preceding thing goes off. Then finally dukkha goes off. Understand? There are 5 things listed. Dukkha. So you can very easily understand. Suppose we do not have this human form at all. Okay. Where is dukkha? Who is going to experience? Okay. So janma is first of all essential. Okay. So without janma there is no question of dukkha. And janma is not possible without any pravritti. Okay. So pravritti. And pravritti is because of some dosha, and the dosha is due to mithya jnana. In fact, this all things have to be explained in great detail, but the point I wanted to convey through this was, so there is a sequence of things which have been nicely identified and carefully argued out as to what leads to ultimately this dukkha nivritti. In fact, the purpose of Nyaya Shastra is atyantika dukkha nivritti. So you can very easily understand this. Mithya jnana is something which is the cause for most of the problems. So even in our own family, there is a certain misunderstanding that happens. Okay, that creates all kinds of problems and complications and dukkha. Okay. So this and this mithya jnana is to be carefully understood, and therefore this Vatsyayana has in great detail explained what are the kinds of mithya jnana that we have and so on and so forth. So this Nyaya Shastra's purpose is atyantika dukkha nivritti, and it is achieved by removing sequentially the causes which produce the dukkha. Okay. The bottommost layer lies in, it is like identifying, see, in a country like this, the bottommost layer is corruption. Okay, why are things not working? They will say it is all because corruption. You can just think of it goes on to various levels. So if you are able to eradicate this, then the whole thing will go. But how will the corruption go? So it has to change here, right? So unless this person is convinced that this is not going to be helpful in the long run for the society to function well, there is no way that one can correct this. So this is something, this mithya jnana that these people have, that it is in the happiness of the other thing that our happiness lies. So this has to be first of all clearly convincing to every individual. As I don't like myself to be cheated, the other fellow should also be thinking along these lines, and therefore I have to respect his feelings. Unless these things are there, so the line of thinking has to be modified. Okay, so this mithya jnana leads to dosha. Okay, dosha leads to a different kind of a pravritti, right? So that I will be happy by just cheating everybody. If this thinking is there, there is a certain dosha in his line, and because of this dosha, his pravritti will be in a different line, and that creates a lot of problems, and that leads to dukkha, right? So ultimately, mithya jnana has to go. Okay, at various levels, one can think of this. So that is what is meant by this sutra. In fact, there are several mithya jnanas which are listed here. Okay, I think I will completely skip this. So he is giving about 10-15 mithya jnanas and how this mithya jnana will be gone. Okay, so we will take up this later if at all. We can, maybe since there is no session, I can continue. If at all you are interested, we will break and then we can continue later. Now, this immediately after these two sutras, we have third sutra, which is listing pratyaksha anumana upamana shabdaha pramanani. Understand? So what was the first sutra? pramana prameya samshaya prayojana drishtanta siddhanta avayava tarka etc. Nigrahasthananam tattvajnanat nishraya sadhikamaha. First sutra. Second sutra is dukkha janma pravritti dosha mithya jnananam uttarottarapaye tadanantarapayat apavargaha. Now, having said this, so having said the purpose of this Shastra, having said what we are going to deal with this in this Shastra, then the first term that we have is Pramana, right? So, what are Pramanas? That is what is being stated by the third sutra here. Pratyaksha Anumana Upamana Shabdah Pramanani. These are the four means of knowledge that we consider in this Shastra. So, in Yoga Sutra, we have the seventh sutra which lists this Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani. Whereas in Nyaya Sutra, the third sutra lists four things, whereas the Yoga Sutra lists only three things. So, it does not consider this analogy as an independent Pramana. Okay. So, Pratyaksha Anumana Agamaha Pramanani. So, this is what this sutra tells in Yoga Sutra. So, what are these? We will just see. But before that, maybe with this verse, I will end this session. There are various thinkers who have evolved various disciplines. So, this verse is a nice verse which actually helps us in comprehending how different kinds of philosophers have propounded different philosophies based on the number of pramanas that they accept. So, that is what it tells you. Okay. So, how many means of knowledge do I accept? So, I gave you one example since these two disciplines are very famous. Yoga Sutra lists 3, whereas Nyaya Sutra lists 4. So, this verse tells you how many take how many pramanas, different kinds of philosophers. There is one school called Charvaka. Have you heard? Charvaka. They are generally described as materialists. Okay. This is the terminology that is employed. So, the verse goes like this. You repeat. Charvakastavadekam dvitayamapi punaha Bauddha Vaisheshikau dvau Bhasarvajnascha Sankhyaha Tritayam Udayanadhyaha Chatushkam Vadanti Prahuh Prabhakaraha Panchakamapi Chavayam Depi Vedanta Vijñāha Shatkam Pauranika Stu Ashtakamabhidadhire Sambhavaiti Yogat. You can see the number starting from Ekam up to Ashtav, Ashtakam. So, there are different philosophers who have agreed upon among their own schools that these are the number of pramanas that are acceptable to us. So, it starts from 1 to 8. The materialists, whom we generally call as Charvakas, they accept only one pramana. Charvakas tavadekam. This ekam means only pratyaksha. I will not accept any other means of knowledge as giving valid knowledge besides pratyaksha. Okay? So, this is one school. Charvakas tavadekam. Dvitayamapi punaha Bauddha Vaisheshikau dvau. Bauddha Vaisheshikau, Buddhist, whom I was just mentioning earlier. So, they just consider 2 pramanas. So, it is Pratyaksha and Anumana, okay, perception and inference. Bauddha Vaisheshikau, they consider only 2. Then Bhasarvajna is another kind of a philosopher, and then Sankhyaha. See, Sankhyaha. Yoga and Sankhya, they sort of go together. That is why in Yoga Sutra we find only 3 pramanas listed. So, Sankhya's also take only 3. So Pratyaksha, Anumana and Shabda, Agama. Okay, so they take only 3. So Bhasarvajnascha Sankhyaha Tritayam. Tritayam means they consider a group of 3. Then Udayanadhyaha Chatushkam Vadanti means Udayanacharya etc. means logicians. They consider 4 pramanas. Okay? So 4 means of knowledge. Prahuf Prabhakaraha Panchakamapi. Prabhakara is school which has been promoted by Prabhakara. Prabhakaraha means those who belong to the school of Prabhakara. So this is one kind of Mimamsakas. So they consider Panchakam. They consider 5 pramanas. Prahuf Prabhakaraha Panchakamapi cha Vayam. So he says this Vayam, it refers to this Bhatta Mimamsaka. So we and Vedanta we consider 6 and Shatkam means 6. Pauranikastu Ashtakam Abhidadhire. So we not only confine to the 6, but Pauranikaha means those who consider this Purana also as an independent pramana. Whatever is stated is there is also something true. For instance, there are so many people in ISKCON, right? So Bhagavata, whatever is stated in Bhagavata has to be truth. So something may be found in Bhagavata which is not found in other scriptures, but since it is stated, it is also considered as a means of valid means of knowledge, and therefore it is also true. This is 7th class. Then Ashtakam Abhidadhire Sambhava Aitishya Yogat. Sambhava Yogat means there is something called omens, if this happens, this will happen. Okay? So Sambhava Yogat means there are certain events which happen and these are indicative of something, and therefore they are also to be considered as independent means of knowledge. So this is how, we have different class of people who believe in the number of pramanas varying from one school to the other. Okay, they are independent means. Independent, that is very important. Some people put this into some other category, and some people do not consider this as a pramana and so on. So this is how a nice verse has been constructed. It gives us a picture of how many pramanas are considered by how many people.
I have a question. The concept of dukkha, is there any difference between our Sanatani culture and with Buddhist culture? Because the dukkha concept is very prominent in Buddhist philosophy. Here and there, dukkha and dukkha. So please.
Okay. I don't think there can be any difference in terms of dukkha. Dukkha and sukha are two things which are experienced by the individual. Articulating sukha and articulating dukkha is very difficult. So I am so joyful. You show me how you are joyful. I am so pain. There are so many people who come and tell me, I'm experiencing enormous amount of pain. I say your face doesn't reflect that. No, you are not experiencing, I may say. Okay. Even then they say, no, you will not understand, I have so many. Right? So this is sensed only by individual. Suppose somebody says, I have a severe ache in my ear. Now this is only sensed by that person, it is not sensed by other people. Similarly, sukha, extremely happy. Sometimes it is reflected through facial expression. I am not denying that. But many a times it doesn't. Now, your question is there a difference between the notion of dukkha in Buddhas and other schools of philosophy? Can there be a difference? There is a generic definition which is being presented by people which is quite acceptable. If at all you want to define sukha, how will you define? The general definition is anukula vedaniyam. Okay? and Pratikula Vedaniyam. These are the two terms that are employed. Okay. Anukula Vedaniyam means that this association is something which I feel is so conducive for me. Okay. So that which is non-conducive for me. So you cannot live with a tooth pain. But if it is a hot summer and the outside temperature is 42, if some AC is provided, so you come inside and it is Anukula Vedaniyam. And if you go outside and you are supposed to walk there, it is Pratikula Vedaniyam. This is something common for all. So what will be Dukkha? Okay. So you live with a partner and the partner more or less agrees with you in all your thought processes, then it is Anukula Dampatyam. Okay. So there is a difference of opinion between the spouses. So on every aspect, it is a Pratikula Dampatyam. Okay. Anukula and Pratikula is something. So this is how one has to understand. So this general definition of Sukha and Dukkha is this, and this will be common across every individual. What may happen with a certain maturity is, this has nothing to do with the independent philosophy. Okay. The same individual, if he were to live for certain principles, okay, his theory and understanding of the life will change. So I know several people, I am just telling you from example, they would have been enjoying to go to a 5-star hotel and spend some 5,000 rupees, okay, at a certain stage in life, and they may be craving for it, taking partners and participating in certain kinds of functions. That was Anukula Vedaniyam with a certain understanding at a given point of time. But later they realize, I mean, what is all this? Why should I just spend money in this? This is a huge wastage of money. I will have a very simple life. I will. So then the same party becomes Pratikula Vedaniyam for him. So having a drink, having a joy with certain things. Okay. So that will become Pratikula Vedaniyam with a certain mature understanding. So what is a source of Sukha at one time itself becomes a source of Dukkha at a later time. So this has to do with this thought process which gets refined. So this is Anukula for me, to be with myself. Ultimately, if you understand what Sukha is, it is essentially the cessation of a certain craving that we have. I want to become this, I want to have this. If that craving comes to a halt at a given moment, then you are experiencing a Sukha. Once that happens, the next moment some other craving may take up. And if that comes to a halt, then there is a temporary Sukha that is being experienced by us. So Sukha is the state of a mind when it does not have a craving for something. So you just come to your own state, then you experience Sukha. All of us have Sukha in sleep because there is no craving. Understand? There is a certain Sukha which is experienced. What was the contact that we had which gave us Sukha? Is it eating? Is it watching something? Is it listening to something? Is it hugging somebody? None. If you have a craving for hugging, then the moment you hug, that craving is lost, you feel Sukha. Okay. So this is what ultimately Sukha is if you thoroughly analyze. If you want to eat in a hotel, if everything works out, then that is a Sukha. Okay. So this Sukha and Dukkha has to do with that feeling of Anukulata and Pratikulata. If this is with me, then I am happy. If that kind of a feeling is there, then on achieving that you feel happy. Okay. So this philosophically, so what they may say is, if you go to a Charvaka, then he will say, the difference that you are asking is, They will give you, the other philosophers may give you a certain perspective to see what you conceive as Sukha as source of Dukkha. What is generally conceived as a source of Sukha is by and large, whether it is a Buddhist or Vedanti, he will generally say it is not the source of Sukha eternally. The eternal Sukha is something which is there with you. Okay? So ultimately all of them will tell you this in a different way.
Regarding the number of pramanas, you have mentioned 4 pramanas of Nyaya Shastra: Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda Pramana. According to Tarka Sangraha, Shabda Pramana is of 2 types, Vaidika and Laukika.
Shabda is of 2 types.
Shabdaha Dvividhaha.
That is all.
Okay.
Now, this Pratyaksha itself, you can further say, no, Chakshusha Pratyaksha, Shravana Pratyaksha and so on. When you say, so how do you know that there is a noise? So it is not through your eyes, it is through your ears. How do you know he was present in the class? So it is only through the eyes. Okay. So there itself, Pratyaksha itself you can further classify. Chakshusha Pratyaksha, Shravana Pratyaksha and so on. Similarly, the Shabda also you can further classify broadly into Vaidika and Laukika.
Pramana has no qualification, sir. Shabda
Pramana is only one.
Not divided.
Pramana is, when will you describe a knowledge as something which is born out of Shabda? Shabda is basically a kind of wave which comes and hits your ear, and if you know the meanings of those words which have been uttered, you are familiar with that, you are able to recollect what you have already taken in your mind as this kind of sound means this, then a certain cognition arises. So that cognition which arises by listening to words, and these words can be of 2 types. One which is belonging to the scriptures, Vaidika, the other which belongs to the world, okay, that which is created, that is called Laukika. Okay. These are the 2 things. But as such, whether it is arising from the Vaidika word or it is arising from the Laukika word, or whether it is arising by listening to what I am saying, this is all Shabda. Okay. So the main agent here is, so in Shabda also there is a Pratyaksha which is involved. So you have to be clear in understanding this. When we try to talk about means of knowledge, what plays the crucial role in giving this cognition is what is important. Even as you are sitting in this class, unless you hear the words that are being uttered by me, and hearing these words has to do with Pratyaksha. You understand? So, sound entering into the ears. So, Indriya Artha Sannikarsha. Okay, there is a sense organ, and the sense organ receives certain signals. This is Pratyaksha. But after that, there is a certain process which takes place, which is very crucial there, and therefore it is called Shabda Jnana. Okay, it is not conceived as this. Pratyaksha is Shabda, but the Jnana that arises is through listening to this Shabda, and therefore it is, okay, Shabda Jnana.
I just wanted to ask, how applicable can I make it in my own life? How can I apply it in my own life, in day-to-day life, how to understand the whole process of Nyaya?
Let me tell you. Suppose, have you learnt music? Little bit. So you keep listening to music, right? Initially you go and sit, you say Sarigama Padanisa. Then in due course, so you keep listening to certain ragas, then you say this is Kalyani, This is Yamuna Kalyani, this is Saveri, this is various things you say. So it is a certain process which happens on its own. But initially, you have to learn that if these swaras are present in this sequence, then it is Kalyani. Okay. So there you may have to listen to it repeatedly, not once. So you don't just, there are experts, the moment they start singing, they will say that this is this raga, right? This is Arabhi, so this is Mohana. So they will just say, you don't need to. But even if I listen to 50 times, I will not be able to say, because I have not connected. Okay. So this is, I have not connected means I have not paid attention to this raga and then taken that raga identified with this name. Similarly, whether it comes to this Nyaya Shastra or certain other disciplines of knowledge also, over some time, it is a natural process that happens in the individual, that if you keep thinking along these lines, your line of thinking itself shifts. You will not be able to see a tangible change by just listening to once or twice or thrice. It may happen in some individuals, if they have hit their head so hard somewhere, then certain moments may happen that they will completely change. But the line of reasoning and the line of thinking is something which does not just happen by 1 or 2 sessions. So you have to learn this, you have to relate to various things, then it is a natural process. So even if you do not want, it will happen. Okay. So if you have been deceived 2-3 times by some fellow, then the 4th time, so you yourself will know, I mean, if this is done, I mean, it is a matter of deceit. So you know that. So even if you do not want, you will realize. So that is as far as these principles of Nyaya coming to the life. Okay. So this is something which we will not be able to quickly relate, that whether my reasoning is right here, wrong here, etc. It may happen in some individual, it may not happen even if they study it. See, there are various kinds of processes, it is a quite complicated thing. Okay. So imbibing certain principles in one's own lifestyle. Okay. So this is something, is a complicated thing, but by and large, so repeated thinking along those lines will help refining us. You will ask the right questions and so on and so forth. Okay.
And also the second question, as you said that the mind is getting refined every day, every moment. So how do I know that this is how, when I give an argument or refute somebody's argument, how is that going to be right? Because it is my mind is changing every moment.
See, there are 2 things. One is convincing oneself of the truth of a certain statement, convincing the other of the truth of that statement. Okay. If you are convinced about the truth of a certain statement, then that cannot change. Okay. However much somebody says that Rasagulla will be quite bitter, you will not agree, right? Because you have tasted it, you know it is sweet. So this others convincing, there is no question of, if you are quite convinced, if you are in a state of samshaya, then obviously there is going to be a problem. Okay. If somebody asks a certain question, if you yourself do not know the answer, then you will not be able to defend your position. That is a different kind of a thing. So there is something called samshayatmaka jnana, there is something called nishchayatmaka jnana. Okay. So the samshayatmaka jnana is always dangerous. So we should have nishchayatmaka jnana. Okay. So then there is no question of changing position with respect to this thing. So even if you are fallacious, in your line of thinking. So if you are going to be convinced by the other, you will change your position.
Sir, I wanted to understand what do the scriptures tell about when we are in a tark, then what are the different logical fallacies we might fall into? Because our arguments and thought of reasoning have to be very refined.
Okay.
And one more thing I wanted to understand was in the perception mode of knowledge gaining, there are always some instances like optical illusions where same phenomenon is interpreted by it in different ways. So how much reliable is this perception mode of knowledge gaining?
Okay. So I will answer this in detail little later when we deal with perception. And the other modes thing that you were asking, what are the sources of delusion, etc. That I skipped those 4 slides. I will touch upon, okay, which will be useful from the viewpoint of refining oneself. Okay. So what line of thinking has been advocated by Shastras which will be helpful in refining oneself and enabling the society to be a more harmonious society. So it's not that the individual knowledge alone, okay. So you may be in a completely different status, but you may have to take the entire society into account when you are trying to propose a certain theory. So you cannot say that there is nothing like mother, there is nothing like father. Ultimately, you can go and declare. Okay. In fact, Bhagavad Pada into na shasta, na shastram, na shishyo, na shiksha, na chatvam, na chaham, na chayam prapanchaha. You can keep on doing this. But then, this is not the way things will work as far as the society's functioning is concerned. So there is a teacher, there is a taught, there is a father, there is a son. So ultimately, you can just say, what is this? No, father is just created my. I have only created this notion of father. I have only created this notion of teacher. So what will work, what will not work? What are the certain things that will be very helpful in organizing the society? That is something which we have a set of things, okay. So that is what they call as mithya jnana, okay. So that which will be delirious.
Sir, we all are not like ordinary student here. We all are also teaching and doing so many other activities, and we are here and getting great knowledge by great people like you, and thank you to you and Nishaji and the entire IIT Kanpur for this. My thing is that we were great, no doubt about it. So after that, what has to be done now? I attended one of the programs earlier also. But there it was lamented कि साहब रिसर्च पेपर खाली 500 हैं. इसका जो practical application, the thing, how the application can be used, like how you are teaching the finance and accounting and how you are teaching in different top universities, legal universities in India and elsewhere. So why not the Nyaya Sutra be incorporated there? What got us here won't take us there. How to have an end user approach. When we talk about the student is not interested in knowing only about IKS, but about their day-to-day life. About the job, about relationships, how this knowledge can be useful to them. So why don't we think, and also here we are having so many good collective people over here, why don't we create those agenda that we talk on the last day of the FDP? Why don't we create those cohort and start working on it rather than trying to test somebody's knowledge, कि साहब इसने कितना याद रखा, या filling that questionnaire, or again we talk about the rote learning. Why do we apply not some innovative way of assessment?
I don't think any of these questions will be expecting you to remember something which one expects from an age of boy who is of the age of 8 or 13. I don't think they may do that. Okay. It is not a question of rote memorization which is being talked about. It is not a question of just chest thumping that is being done here. All that is being done in this discipline, in this particular lecture, is to enable you to appreciate certain discipline which has thought about as to how the jnana that arises in you arises, what are the different modes in which it arises. It is just a question of letting your mind think. Let me just tell you one more thing since you asked this question. This IKS that one is talking about is not something which is totally irrelevant. I am happy that you raised this question. If I have to do Python programming, will this IKS help me? If I were to do something in Wall Street, will this IKS help me? If this is the kind of question that you are asking me, I would say yes. Ultimately, what one has to understand is to enable this person to think well to come up with a solution at a given problem that is given to him. The students who are undergoing 3 years and 4 years of struggle who join IIT end up doing nothing in engineering and keep doing something else. What is this training helping them? Whether the lab that they have done or the programming that they have done or what they have learnt in applied mechanics or physics or chemistry is all zero. So it is the rigorous training to think on something which is going to help them. So they may be doing mechanical engineering and they may be doing, I know, recently I met a person who did electronics engineering here and he did something in Wall Street. It has nothing to do with what he has learnt in electronics here. So this problem solving ability to be creative, to think along the right direction is what this education is going to provide you. Nothing more than that. There are people who have done excellently in their geology and they keep doing some finance somewhere else. So this discipline, what we learn in our schools is sociology, which is the capital of which city. So this ability to recall things is something which is proportional to the training that you give to your mind. Even when you are sitting in a meeting, you may not have access to all the text that you want to refer to. If by some training that you have provided to yourself, if you are able to retain so many things in your memory, you may be able to connect things, which naturally happens. And it is a training, even if rote memorization has been there in India, and these wonderful scholars who have produced really makes me astonished. So how they have been able to connect one thing with the other thing? So what you connect doesn't matter, the ability to connect is what matters. The ability to analyze is what matters, what problem you analyze doesn't matter. So all that one is trying to do here is to, even those people who have been engaged in this national education policy, at least some of them I know, they are really stalwarts. So they found that there are two reasons. One is a certain self-confidence that this person gains by knowing that I belong to a certain nation which has produced really bright minds, that itself contributes to the self-confidence, which is an intangible benefit that we have, and this benefit has been thoroughly explored. I can tell you, I have visited China several times, and the last 30-40 years Chinese have really done well. And one of the reasons I can easily see is, I went to this Beijing University and there was a huge stone in which they had laid down some 5 things. One of the things I asked, what are the translations of them? They said it is be patriotic and so on and so forth. So this self-pride that one gains by this itself forms a very major factor by knowing that these people have done. In fact, I have done my MSc Physics and Engineering. Till then, I did not know any of these names, Aryabhatta or Bhaskara or anything. Not a single name. I really felt bad. But then when I came to know that these people have done remarkable things, and the order to which that they have achieved in mathematics is something which is close to Newton and Leibniz. This really made me really feel happy, and most of the students who just learned this, they also feel happy. And the point is, they have arrived at in a completely different way. It is only the training. How do you look at, how are you creative? That is all it matters. So information is not something which is valued. Processing the information is what is valued. And storing this information is always a certain ability. I have seen people who are able to keep this data in their mind, and the kind of delivery that they are able to do is something which is completely different from someone who has to depend on each and everything for narrating his laptop or his paper. Okay. So if at all memorization, in fact I really feel bad that we have gone in the wrong direction, I can tell you for sure. So thinking that there is absolutely nothing which is needed for you to either memorize tables or memorize curses, etc., is all nonsense. It is a certain faculty that we are blessed with. That alone is not sufficient. In fact, even in our tradition, I will tell you. So even in the Vedic tradition, there have been people who got trained for 6 months to do this analysis and 6 months to do this Veda. It is not that pure rote memorization that is. In fact, there are scriptures, I can quote hundreds of them, sentences, where people have been strongly condemning that you memorize something and you do not know how to analyze. Great people don't do different things, they do things differently. So this is something which has been proved to have done something differently. Okay, and this differently doing certain things may have some value is what we feel. That is all. That every form of knowledge has to be respected, and its relevance can be thought only in that context, not universalize them. The problem that we are facing today, why we are again and again talking about IKS, is some people felt that this is the only form of knowledge that you have to learn, which did not fit us, and thereby we have lost some things. Okay, now let me come to this Pratyaksha. So Pratyaksha is one of the modes by which we gain jnana, and it is something which is a very, very important mode. We have to understand this. This has been defined in this sutra like this: Indriyartha sannikarshotpannam jnanam avyapadeshyam avyabhichari vyavasayatmakam pratyaksham. Okay, so this is the definition that is given. Perception, we keep using this term. So his perception is different from my perception, etc. We keep using this in many places. Let us first understand the term Pratyaksha. The word Pratyaksha is having two components. One is Aksha, the other is Prati. The word Aksha actually means a sense organ. Okay? Aksha means some sense organ. There are 5 of them. The 5 of them, see, Chakshuhu, Granam, Shrotram. Okay, so we have a sense of taste and a sense of touch. Okay, these are known as Aksha. Okay, Akshi means eyes. Aksha means the sense organs. So when we say this knowledge came through Pratyaksha, it means that there was a contact which was established between the sense organ and the entity. And once this contact gets established, so this jnana once the connection gets established. You understand? So this jnana is bound to take place. If the room is dark and the light comes on, then that this room is bright is a knowledge that arises out of pratyaksha. Or the absence of light in this room is also through pratyaksha. So this is something which is inevitable that takes place. You are sitting in the room. What is your name? Manan. So Manan is sitting there. So if I were to open my eyes and the sight takes place, then the presence of Manan is something which is pratyaksha for me, and it is through my eyes. Okay. And if someone is talking there, I am able to hear some murmur. So it is that someone is talking there is pratyaksha for me. It is not through eyes, but it is through ears. So whenever there is a contact that is established between the sense organ and the object which it can sense, the knowledge that arises out of it is called pratyaksha. Understand? So the eyes cannot figure out the taste. So some gulab jamun is kept here. Whether it is tasty or not, I may not be able to say unless I put it into my mouth. Okay. So different organs have the ability to grasp different things, and this knowledge that arises that it is tasty, that this is beautiful, okay, so that this music is very good, etc., they arise through the sense organ coming in contact with those entities. Okay, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. So whether this, so suppose there is a scent which is kept in a bottle, whether it have good fragrance or not, how do I know? Unless it is sprayed, and once it is sprayed, this knowledge is something which is inevitable. This is what is called pratyaksha. So how is it defined? Indriyartha sannikarsha utpannam jnanam. Sannikarsha means association. Utpannam means that which arises. The knowledge that arises out of the organ getting into contact with those objects is what we call as pratyaksha. But then there are a few words which are employed here. See, avyapadeshyam, avyabhichari, vyavasayatmakam. See, these are three qualifiers. This avyapadeshyam means something which cannot be stated. So suppose I say, this gulab jamun is so tasty, suppose you say. You can only say this. Unless this fellow swallows, he will not be able to have a real experience. Okay. If I were to describe that, so that it is tasty, suppose someone is really to be believed, then if you say that it is tasty, then also I have a feeling that it is tasty. How does it taste is a different thing. That it is tasty is either through eating or through the words also it can arise. But when it arises through the words, that taste, that it is tasty, is something which is arising through the word that you utter to me. So this sweet is so tasty, you will recommend to purchase somewhere if I come to your place. But then unless I eat, this will not be known to me. So that jnana, see, that arises out of the words should be differentiated from what you experience, and therefore they are calling it as avyapadeshyam. Understand? The real experience cannot be put in the form of words, okay, to avoid. So this is what is called ativyapti. The definition that you give, okay, should not be applicable to the other fellow. We are defining something. When we define something, the definition should fit only to that fellow and should not go to the other fellow. Okay. So who is Manan? Suppose I say the one who is wearing brown shirt. Suppose I say this. If there are three fellows wearing brown shirt, will I define Manan properly? Okay. If it is to be identified, then it has to be really some unique feature, right? So that is how, in order to avoid over applicability. So these three terms have been employed, okay, to just see that it is not going to Shabda. Shabda is Vyapadeshya. Vyapadeshya means that which can be stated. So Avyabhichari means this cognition that arises. So they are talking about this valid cognition. So invalid cognition should be avoided. Okay. So therefore Avyabhichari. Vyabhichari means something which gets refuted later. Okay. So Avyabhichari is a term that they use. So if false knowledge, so that should be not included in the pratyaksha. So fallacious cognition. So to avoid that, this is used. And vyavasayatmaka is, vyavasaya here means nishchaya. Okay. Vyavasaya. In fact, if some of you have read Bhagavad Gita, you have this was vyavasayatmakam jnanam. Okay. So vyavasaya means nishchaya. So normally vyavasaya means exercise. Okay. It is also used in that sense. Okay, by the way, if any of you do not understand any particular term, you are free to ask, okay, even while the lecture goes on. So you don't need to hesitate. So it is all open to you. Okay, so this is how this definition goes. Okay, the crux of the definition is Indriyartha Sannikarshottannam Jnanam. The other terms that have been employed is to avoid over applicability when you are trying to define something. This short paragraph that you find below is something which is important for you to know. I was explaining to you that there are different modes of knowledge that we have. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Upamana and so on. All these knowledge which we talk about arising through different modes, they are invariably dependent on pratyaksha. So this is something which we have to understand well. So pratyaksha agamashritam anumanam, the inference that we are talking about. Okay, let us just understand this in a broader sense. Today, there are various kinds of tests that are being done in the medical science. You want to know how your heart rate functions. Nowadays, everybody has this Apple Watch, and then he has various things. Now, there is some number which comes. Based on the number, so you know certain things, right? So how much have you walked, how much footsteps you have made, so how much of energy is being spent by you, etc., etc. What is all this based on? Inference. So the doctor who looks at the graph that is being generated when the bulbs are fitted into various parts of your body, and then he is able to tell something about the functioning of the heart, right? So whether you are fit to travel there, you are not fit to travel to this altitude and so on. What is all this based on? Inference. Now this inference, if you just look little bit before, is all based upon pratyaksha and agama, both of them. Let me tell you how. Just to take this graph which is being analyzed. Now this person knows that he is a healthy fellow, and then that this graph is generated by this, right? So you study certain graphs which have a certain feature, and this feature is a mark of healthy person, is something which is known by pratyaksha. And then, I mean, if there is a departure from this, then there is something wrong is being inferred by us. So pratyaksha is something which is very crucial. Second point, you have a certain set of graphs here, you have a certain other set of graphs generated elsewhere. Now what is being done is, so this knowledge which is elsewhere is also brought to us because of certain literature. So even if this kind of graph is there, this is something which is acceptable, is something which comes later through the study somewhere else. So this is what is called agama. So the inference that you make whether this person is healthy or not is dependent both on pratyaksha as well as agama. Okay. So whether it is this allopathy science where you study this graph or you study something else, so we always have a certain knowledge which is transmitted to us. How does this doctor know? This doctor doesn't know. He has only studied. You understand? The inference that he makes is based on his own pratyaksha sometimes. Sometimes it is transmitted through agama. And therefore, this first statement, pratyakshagama shritam anumanam. Okay? So, the anumanam inference is based on both pratyaksha and agama. Then, sa anviksha pratyakshagamaabhyam ikshitasya anvikshanam anviksha. How is this term anviksha comes? Anu means something which follows. Understand? Ikshanam is carefully looking into. So, carefully looking into something which has been brought by some other means of knowledge. That is what is inference. Okay? So, some form of knowledge is brought to me. So, you present certain evidences in the court. So, this is something which is brought to me. And based on that, I analyze something and then I draw certain conclusion. So, this has to do with agama and pratyaksha. So, anu means something which follows. That is what he said. Pratyaksha agamabhyam ikshitasya. Ikshitasya means something which was already known. Anvikshanam, once again looking into, is what is called anviksha. Taya pravartate iti anvikshiki. Okay. So, that body of knowledge which is based on, okay, that generation of knowledge which is based upon these two things. Hey Babu. So, which is based upon these two things is what is called Nyaya Vidya, Nyaya Shastram. Okay. Yat punaha anumanam pratyaksha agama viruddham. This is again a very important statement. That inference which is contradicting to pratyaksha and agama is Nyaya Bhasa. Okay. What does this mean? This means that among the various means of knowledge, we have a certain hierarchy, and the hierarchy is always given to pratyaksha. Okay. This is something which is very important to know. So, this discipline which we are studying, so clearly gives, okay, precedence to, yes, Nyaya Bhasaha. See, Nyaya Bhasaha means it looks like Nyaya, it pretends like it is not Nyaya, it is incorrect, false reasoning. Okay. So, false reasoning, that is what it means. So, that which is contradicting to pratyaksha or agama is Nyaya Bhasaha. In fact, this has been so thoroughly analyzed and discussed even in Ayurveda Shastra. Okay. So, these are important points which we need to understand. So, however much one may say, if it is not going to work for me, then this is to be given precedence. Whatever be that, this all just has to be thrown. Now, this is something which is quite interesting. I was mentioning to you about this Yoga Sutra in the morning, and this sentence that you find in this slide is drawn from Vyasa Bhashya. Vyasa's commentary on Yoga Sutra. Okay. This is a somewhat short commentary. I was quite pleased to read this. So, he defines pratyaksha like this. Indriya pranalikaya. You understand? Just because we are keeping our eyes open, knowledge does not happen. If I am thinking of something else seriously, then this shabda, that shabda, nothing matters to me. The sense organ remaining open doesn't mean much. That is why he is saying Indriya Pranalikaya Chittasya. It is very important. What gets connected ultimately is the mind through the sense organ. So, Indriyartha Sannikarsha is what was stated there. But in this Vyasa Bhashya, he is bringing this aspect also. Okay? Indriya Pranalikaya Chittasya Vahyavastuparāgāt means a connection gets established between the mind and the entity outside through this sense organ. Okay? And the sense organ obviously plays a major role. The mind cannot sense the form if the eyes are closed. Okay? So it has to pass through. So this has to receive certain signals. So Chittasya Vahyavastuparāgāt Tadvishaya means, so suppose I see Manan for the first time and I am able to create a certain form that you represent in my own mind. So tomorrow when I see, I will immediately recall that this form corresponds to this name. So it gets registered. Now there is a certain specific aspect in you. There is some general aspect in you. What is your name? Okay. So there is some sweetie. So the sweetie also has two eyes, one nose and various other things. All are common. So there is some samanya, right? Samanya is something which is common. Which is common as a human being, which is there in every individual. But there is something which is Vishesha, which is unique to this person, unique to every individual. Now he is describing the entity as something which possesses some generic features and some special features. That is what is meant by Samanya Visheshatmanaha. Okay. So every entity possesses some generic feature, okay, and some specific feature. Okay. So the Samanya Visheshatmanaha Arthasya, that entity, Visheshavadharana Vrittihi. So that Samanya aspect is left out and that Vishesha aspect is taken. That Vritti is what you call as Pratyaksha. Okay. So Indriya Pranalikaya Chittasya Bahyavastu Uparāgāt. So the word Uparaga means connection here. Bahyavastu Uparāgāt. So Tadvishaya Samanya Visheshatmanaha Arthasya. There is a lot of things which are packed in each and every word. I don't get into more details. If you are a scholar in this, then I can explain something more why this word has been employed. But the general understanding should be, so there has to be a connection which should get established of the mind and the entity, and it has to happen through sense organ. Okay. So every word is important. If you simply say that entity, so I close my eyes, then also I see Manan. That can't be called Pratyaksha. Understand? So it is not Pratyaksha. This Indriya has to play a role. Then also I can get some figure, right? So you dream so many things. What you have seen has been created by you in your own mind. But that is not Pratyaksha. So this Visheshavadharana Pradhana Vrittihi. This Pradhana is also very important. Okay. So there is a Samanyamsha, there is a Visheshamsha, both are gathered by me. And the Visheshavadharana Pradhana. Okay. So this is what we call as Pratyaksham. Phalam Avishishtaha Paurusheyaha Chittavrittir Bodhaha. Phalam means the effect of this. Okay. The effect of this process is a certain mental modification that takes place. Okay. And that modification generates a jnana in you, knowledge. Even if I do not know, okay, your name, etc. So if there are 4 people, so these are young students, these are old people, etc. I have some general knowledge. Okay. That jnana that arises through the contact is what we call as Pratyaksha. Okay. Okay, let me just tell you the definition of inference. tat purvakam trividham anumanam purvavat sheshavat samanyato drishtancha. Okay. Tat purvakam trividham anumanam. The word tat purvakam means you have to understand that which has pratyaksha as its precedence. Without that, there is no inference. So, tatpurvakam anumanam, this inference is broadly divided into three types. So, one is purvavat, sheshavat, the third is samanyato drishtancha. Okay. So, this process is a little more important. I will not get into the details, but I will just give you the generic understanding of what is involved in anumana. This is something which is important. This anumana involves two entities at least. So, from one thing you infer other thing, right? So, let us take this example of doctor studying ECG. That one thing that he sees is that graphs that are generated, right? Now, what he recognizes, which you and I cannot recognize, is the connection between that wave pattern and state of the health of the heart. So, there is a certain connection which he has recognized between the pattern of the waves and the state of health of the heart, right? So, one is called linga, the other is called lingi. Linga means indicator, lingi is something which is indicated. What is indicated is the health, the state of the health, okay, how healthy this heart is. What is indicator is the pattern of the graph. Now, the connection between the pattern of the graph and the health is what is called linga-lingi sambandha. Understand? So, linga-lingi sambandha. So, connection. Now, what happens is when he studies this, so this statement you will quickly realize, the terminologies I will first introduce. Now, the moment he sees something now which is generated, you go for a test now. So, there is something which is generated now. Now, when he looks into this, what should happen is in his own mind, the doctor's mind, when he looks at the graph. So, the earlier connections which he has studied before, what is normal pattern, what is aberration, what is abnormal pattern, that thing has to strike him, he has to recount that. So, this recalling that connection has to happen. And once he recalls that earlier connections that have got established by again and again seeing, okay, this is very important. Just by looking at one graph, thousands of graphs have to be looked into, even while getting this knowledge. Okay. So, that connection should be triggered. Okay. When he looks at this now, once that is triggered, that invariable concomitance which is there in his mind makes him realize the other thing. This is what happens in inference. Okay. So, this statement, see, tatpurvakam ityanena, okay, this tatpurvakam means that which has for its precedence. Okay. So, now he is explaining by the word tatpurvakam ityanena lingalinginoho sambandha darshanam. You understand? Earlier he should have seen this, otherwise he cannot recognize the pattern. The connection between linga and lingi. It is like, you can just, a much simpler example is fire and smoke. You would have seen that they two are together. Sambandha darshanam, again and again you have to see. Okay. Lingalingino sambandha darshanam. Then
लिङ्गलिङ्गिनो सम्बद्धयोः दर्शनेन लिङ्गस्थितिः अभिसम्बध्यते.
see, abhisambadhyate means gets connected. Okay. So if you see this pattern now, okay, that which you have seen before is recalled by you. Then,
स्मृत्या लिङ्गदर्शनेन च अप्रत्यक्षः अर्थः अनुमीयते.
you understand? Apratyakshaha arthaha. So the state of the functioning of the heart, anumiyate, is inferred. Inferred by what? Smritya. See, smritya means the patterns that is there in his own mind. Okay, recollecting those patterns and the state of the health. Okay, smritya, and currently seeing this. So this apratyakshaha arthaha, see, that which is not seen by us is inferred. Okay, so this is what it is. So this similarly, suppose you have this hemoglobin is only 8. Okay, so hemoglobin is 11, hemoglobin is 13. So how do you say that this is bad, this is good, etc.? So there is a certain inference which goes on. Okay, so earlier some healthy people have been studied. So this is the pattern that they have. So if this is there, this is normal. If this is not there, this is abnormal, etc. So most of the knowledge that we gain is all based on this inference. And what is involved in the process of inference? And here one has to be extremely careful. That's why if you look at this Nyaya Shastra, the entire thing is to, most of the literature in Nyaya Shastra is to see what are the fallacies that can occur in this inference. What are the various kinds of fallacies that can, common fallacies will be sort of listed, and then how to refine it further, and so on and so forth. This is what goes on. Okay. So most of the knowledge that we gain today is all based on pratyaksha and anumana. But we may think, see, most of the scientists, they may think that we only value pratyaksha and anumana and we don't consider agama, etc. This is all silly statement. Okay, I can tell you for sure that this agama is as important as pratyaksha and inference, because I mean, you study the literature, you just go by most of the things. You have not done anything, you just go by agama. Right? Because this is recommended by them, this is recommended by them, this is recommended by them, and therefore I will recommend. What is this? Is it pratyaksha? Is it anumana? It is all simply agama. So this agama jnanam, agama, in fact he was asking, Dr. Srinivas was asking me, so agama, what is agama? Agama is essentially something which has been handed down to me by ancestors, and what has been handed down is what is called agama, something which has come to me. Agamanam is basically coming to me. The knowledge that has been handed down to me, okay, by my ancestors is what we call as agama. In fact, Veda is also called as agama. So this agama is something which is also playing a very crucial role, and that is why, so in the earlier statement, see, pratyaksha agama ashridam anumanam, all the inferences are based on pratyaksha and agama. Pratyaksha agama ashridam anumanam sa anviksha. That is how the name anvikshiki comes to. This anumeya, see, there are terms that have to be understood by us. Anumana refers to the process. The cognition that arises through anumana is called anumeya, okay, the entity. So the state of the health of the heart is anumeya. The process which goes on is what is called anumana. So in pratyaksha, both are called pratyaksha. So the phenomenon is also called pratyaksha, and the cognition that arises through the phenomenon is also called pratyaksha. So, in terms of this verbal cognition, Shabda Jnana, Shabda is the means and Shabda is the Jnana. So, they use the term Shabda, that which arises out of Shabda or Agama. Now, this is Yoga Darshana. I told you about Vasabhashya. It's something which is interesting.
अन्यस्य तुल्यजातीयेष्वनुवृत्तो भिन्नजातीयेभ्यो व्यावृत्तः सम्बन्धो यः तद्विषया सामान्यावधारणप्रधानावृत्तिः अनुमानः यथा देशान्तरप्राप्ते गतिमत् चन्द्रतारकं चैत्रवत् विन्ध्यश्च अप्राप्तिः
Apraptehe agatihi. So, earlier in the definition of pratyaksha, he was telling samanya vishesha of the two, visheshavadharana pradhana vrittihi. Vrittihi, just understand this term. In this context, vrittihi means a certain transformation that happens in the internal organ. Okay, a certain mental modification that takes place. It is this modification which gives rise to the knowledge. Understand? The signals go on hit, some neurons get fired, and that gives rise to a certain cognition which all of us experience. This is what is happening in short. Neither of us have seen neurons, but we just understand that these are certain things which have been described and there are certain things. And even these terminologies are all, if we look at a deeper level, these are all certain theories which have been built by us. And this, based on these theories, we try to comprehend what is happening in nature. So, nature presents certain things. The human being's endeavor is to understand the functioning of the nature by building certain theories. And the theories are built by observation and by making certain inferences. So, this ability to do this is something which is much better in human being. It is not that that ability is not there. That's the dog, obviously it makes inference. Okay, that is having a certain kind of ability to smell whether a fruit is there in your bag or not. Okay, it does not have perception. So there are certain abilities that they have, and we have much more complex abilities, I would just say. Now, what he is trying to say here is the samanya vishesha, okay, observing certain common features and observing certain special features and so on. Anumeyasya tulyajatiyeshu anuvrittaha bhinnajatiyebhyaha vyavrittaha. So, this tulyajatiya means something which is common and bhinnajatiya is something which is different. Sambandha, suppose, let me just take this example. This will be much easier for us to follow. Suppose you see these Chinese people, most of them, so will not have this long nose and there will be some very short and unprojected nose, right? So most Indians will have some projected nose, right? So among human beings, so you find a class of people having certain features. And now once these features are known to you, then you are able to immediately plug him as Chinese. Certain sort of unique features. Tulya Jatiya means, so they belong to the same class. Okay. So having a very short nose, okay, unprojected nose. So this is common among those people. Bhinna Jatiya is, you take some South Indian, okay, so who have very long nose and so on. So this is something which is Bhinna Jatiya. Among the human beings itself, there is one class which has some features. There is another class which has a completely different feature of the same organ. Okay. So the eyes will be too small, etc. Certain things are distinct. So this sambandha that you are able to establish, okay, with some features and the, the civilization they belong to, or rather the location that they belong to. Okay. So this is what is called samana jatiya and bhinna jatiya. So this having unprojected nose, okay. So this is samana jatiya among that group, and that is distinct from other class of people. So sambandha tadvishaya. Tadvishaya means, so corresponding to that general features that you have observed under connections, samanya avadharana pradhana. This is something which is very important there. So there is something called vishesha, there is something called samanya. So when you try to, whether this is doctor's experiment or this Chinese example that I showed, so what we understand is, see, we see one group of Chinese. You get me some other people from the same region, I can tell that he is Chinese. How do you do that? You have not seen him. So it is not the specific instance which matters, it is the generic connection between this feature and the locality which you have in your mind that plays a crucial role in inference. So similarly in the doctor's case, it is not that specific graph, it is the generic understanding that he has between this form of a graph and the health of a person that plays the role in making the inference. Okay, that is why this sutra says samanyavadharana pradhana vrittihi. So in the case of pratyaksha, it is visheshavadharana pradhana vrittihi. In the case of anumana, it is samanyavadharana pradhana vrittihi anumanam. He is just giving one example. How do you recognize motion? That some object is moving. I am moving. How do you say? So this is position change. Deshantara prapti. Understand? So gatihi means motion. Motion is invariably connected with change in position. So without change in position, you cannot say motion. So that is what is meant by Deshantara praptehe gatimat chandratarakam. The example is Tara means star, Chandra is moon. How do you know that moon is moving? Because it is seen here at some position, then it moves elsewhere, it is seen elsewhere. Right? As you see, I am close to the screen now. If I move here, I am far away from screen. Right? So this Deshantara prapti is what helps me in detecting the motion. So here he is giving this example. Now what you have seen in one place, so you may see motion, but you detect motion in every other object, right? This mosquito is moving, this dog is moving, this cat is moving. What is it that the common feature that is there? Deshantara prapti and motion, they two are connected. Wherever there is Deshantara prapti, you will say that there is motion. Okay, that is what he says. Yatha Deshantara praptehe gatimat chandratarakam. Chaitravat means we have observed in some places. We don't know actually this is moving or not. So do you know how is the moon moving? How do you know? I have only seen in my world mosquito moving, cat moving, donkey moving, myself moving. Okay. So in all this motion I have realized that there is a change in position. Right? So in my day-to-day experience, so I have generalized now. What have I generalized? Wherever there is a motion, there is a change in position. So if there is a change in position, then there has to be motion. Say I see the moon close to the star, I see the moon close to another star. Okay. So this yatha deshantara praptehe gatimat chandra tarakam. Okay, from the change in position I infer that moon has motion. So vindhyascha apraptehe. So vindhyascha apraptehe agatihi. Okay, so apraptehe agatihi means because it does not change its position, therefore it does not have motion. Okay. So the process of inference involves the generic understanding of the invariable concomitance between two entities, and once that is there in our mind, so seeing one thing triggers the earlier knowledge that I have formed myself, and that triggering enables me to see something which is not evident to my sense organ. Okay. One part is evident, the other part is triggered by recollection, and that recollection and this put together, that is what he means. Okay. Put together they give rise to inferential cognition. Anyway, you can have slideshow for 2 minutes. See Shabda definition, then what actually happens in verbal cognition, then see what are the factors that are there in a valid cognition. So then we have defined 16 padarthas, right? So this is debate, this is very important. See what kind of debate we engage with, so that is also important. And then fallacious reason, and then thank you.
Sir, before break you were telling about sukha, ki sukha is, it's when derived from any materialistic thing, then it's not actually, it's a temporary sukha. When your sukha is attained after because of some craving. So I just want to ask ki, how can we control our mind, like the cravings and all everything?
So the sense of satisfaction of having accomplished something is what makes me feel the sukha. Okay. So this, you are sitting for a certain exam and your craving is to clear that exam. If you clear that, it gives a certain sense of satisfaction. That gives you some sukha. If a person is craving for having some association with some lady, if he is able to have, he is able to send some sukha out of it. Now, these are certain things which are generated and experienced by every individual at some stage in life. Okay. So the same thing does not continue over your own life. But one thing which is common at all stages in life is the tripti that arises out of accomplishing that act. Okay. This is what happens. So our inference is, it is that sense of satisfaction which can also be termed as that annihilation of that craving for that particular act which gave rise to sukha. What is invariable among various things? You just understand. So we gain a certain understanding over a period of time that these things do not matter to us. Okay. So if you probe purely from a logical viewpoint, that this cessation of a sense of craving to achieve something is a common factor which is there in all these experiences. Okay. So if one were able to connect this and that, which is a common thing, then we will say that it is ultimately returning back to one's own self rather than these connections. So these connections ultimately make you return back to your own self. So, in other words, the self comes to a certain state of not craving for something else. Okay. So, that is why people who have analyzed this theory, they say, Najatu kamah kamanam upabhogena shamyati havisha krishnavartameva bhuyayeva abhivardhate. Sadhus. So, their understanding is that it is not in possessing something or experiencing something that gives me happiness, but it is in exercising certain control over mind that gives me certain happiness. Now, your question is, to me, my experience is, I am not trying to decry. So, only if I eat that pakoda, I will have happiness. Only if I go to that party, I will have happiness. This is true. I am not denying. Okay, that engagement makes you. But if you analyze that engagement, it is only that cessation of the craving that makes you, which is common factor. Now, how do I do this? Is the question. The secret behind, as people have understood, is you see a certain negative aspect and positive aspect in the same thing. If you look at the negative aspect of possessing that, then you will be naturally driven away from that. Okay. So, there is a nice saying, Kakasya vishtavad asahya buddhihi bhokteshu sa tivra virakti rishyate. In order to explain this state of mind, they use the word what is called virakti or vairagya. After all, we need certain terminology to describe certain states, right? Every state of mind has to be described by a certain word. Now, you have to have a terminology. The terminology that has been used is, you can use dispassion in English. So, what is dispassion? If you want to say, they say, Kakasya vishtavad asahya buddhihi. Asahya buddhihi is, this is not bearable to me. And the example that they give is, suppose you just walk, okay, and some crow, okay, put some shit and it just falls somewhere in the corner of your pajama, let us say. Okay, how does it matter? But we are not comfortable with it, right? Okay. Having that doesn't matter to me, but we don't feel really comfortable out of it. So, like that, Kakasya vishthavat, as you want to get rid of it, asahya buddhihi, bhogyeshu. Bhogyeshu means in those things which are likely to present a sense of happiness, pleasure. If you have that, this is a natural tendency. Okay. So, a very natural feeling that one possesses, okay, in one's own mind, to get rid of things which are generally considered as sources of happiness, that is called Tivra Virakti. And what gives you Tivra Virakti? It gives the clue, Virakti Tivratva Nidana Mahuhu Bhogyeshu Doshekshanameva Santaha. So, Santaha means people who have transcended this by serious thinking. Virakti Tivratva Nidanam. Nidanam means Hetu. Okay. The Hetu that can give rise to this kind of a Virakti, Bhogyeshu Doshekshanam. Doshekshanam means seeing the negative aspect, as I told you in the cracker. Okay. So, I see certain dosha in this. I can see a certain dosha in having the vehicle also. Okay. So, those who do not want to have, they don't want to have. So, this is how doshekshanam means, this is a certain drishti. After all, we have to develop a certain vision towards something, and that vision drives us. If you are in a society where everybody, okay, so has the habit of certain things. So then you are just driven to think along those lines. But if you are in a different society where that is considered not a great thing, so then you see a certain dosha in having that, and therefore you have avoided that. Okay, that doshakshanam if you develop, so you will be naturally getting this vairagya, dispassion.